Hi, I'm Kent. In this video, I'm going to try out underglazes for the first time. In some recent videos, I've been playing around with applying slip to my pots to get an underglaze-like effect. However, it really isn't underglaze. I've done a little bit of digging, and underglazes have some different properties to them relative to slip. Last time I was at my pottery store, I saw they had a variety pack of underglazes, and I decided to go ahead and get them, and in this video we're going to try them out. One of the reasons I got this sampler pack is I've been talking to a few friends that want to try their hand at pottery as well. In particular, they're interested in painting the pots. I've talked to them a little bit about glaze and how it's tricky. You can't quite see what the color is. The change that comes from the final glaze firing is a bit of a surprise, and it's not very intuitive, I think, for most people. And the fact that the glaze melts and can move around a little bit, I think, is also unintuitive. From what I understand, these underglazes actually act a lot more like paint. They'll go on and stick where you put them. The colors wind up being much more consistent. And I think you can mix them together to get different shades in between. I'm pretty sure they're using mason stains or something similar to get this effect, but I really don't know. I'm not going to try that in this video though. This time we're just going to use the colors straight up. Here they all are. There are a dozen different colors here. I think what I'm going to do is take one of my pots that's been bisque fired and divide it up and apply the underglaze to that. This will be a canvas where I'm going to try all the different colors. And looking at underglazes, the number of times you put it on also matters. So if you put it on once or twice, you'll get a rather translucent effect. 3 or 4 times it'll be more opaque. So I'm going to try a different number of times I put it on in this pot as well. Since I have 12 different underglazes, I'm basically going to divide this up into segments like a clock. So I'll have 12 segments I can put the underglazes on. So I've got a pencil here and just put some marks. All right, there's some marks on the top. So I got the 12 hours. Do the same on the bottom, try and get them somewhat aligned. All right, and now I got marks on the bottom, and now I'll just do connect the dots. All right, there we go. We've got 12 wedges now. I'll use one of those for each of the different colors. The other thing I want to do is divide this the other direction. So do this vaguely in half. So what I'm going to do on the top is apply the underglaze, and then I will glaze the top with the clear, and the bottom I think I'm just going to leave raw to see what it looks like. All right, that's all laid out. Now time to apply the underglaze. And I think I'm going to put my underglazes in some sort of order that kind of makes sense. Okay, I've got them lined up in some sort of rainbow-ish order. Not too sure what to do with brown and pink and gray, but close enough. Next, I'll grab a brush and we'll start applying these. I've given all these a good shake already. When I got them, they were pretty solid. So now, yeah, it's pretty liquid-like. When I first opened them up, they very much looked like slip. When slip sits for a while, it gets kind of gelatinous. I think that's called thixotropic. These underglazes looked exactly the same. When I first opened them up, they looked pretty solid, and it took a fair bit of shaking to start to get them to loosen up. Before I use all these, I'm going to give them one more good shake and then put them on. All right, so the next thing is how many different tests do I want to do? So I know I want to do at least 2 coats and 4 coats. Question is, do I do 3 in the middle as well? And I think I can get it to fit on, so we'll try that. right, so that's one coat of the black. I'm gonna go around and do all different colors. I've got some water here off to the side, so I just washed this out. Let's go for gray next. Next up is white. My clay body fires white, so I'm guessing this one's not going to be particularly interesting, but we'll add it in for completeness sake. Also trying to be relatively consistent with my applications here. Although, as I've mentioned in other videos, brushing is not my strong suit. That is once all the way around. Black, gray, white you can barely see, pink, red, brown, orange, yellow, green. Yeah, we got a sky blue and a royal blue, and then finally purple. So I think the first layer is dry, so I'm going to go around again a second time. So reading the instructions, it says between 2 and 4 coats. So I'm going to put a second coat on all of these. One of the things I've noticed already putting on the first coat is some of them go on thicker and are much more opaque, and some of them are going on a little bit thinner and you can see through them more. So I'm going to go ahead and try and cover up exactly where I went the first time as best as possible. All right, let me go ahead and finish up the second coat. There is the second coat, made it all the way around. I suspect one of the reasons to put on multiple coats is really about coverage. Brushing it on, it's a little bit streaky, so by putting on multiple coats, you get a much more even coverage. Now it's time for the third coat. So for the third coat, I'm going to skip the very top and the bottom and only do the 2 inside ones. So this one will be 3 coats, 3 coats, 3 coats, 3 coats. And then finally, the last time around, I'll just do one more coat on the inside one, so those will wind up being 4 coats. All right, third coat. Skip the top and then do these. And skip the bottom. All right, and now for the final coat, the fourth coat, on just the middle band. And the underglaze rainbow is complete. So I have all the colors around the outside. The top and bottom are 2 coats. The next ones in are 3 coats, and the last one in the middle are 4 coats. I'm going to let this dry completely before I glaze the top half of the pot. And while it dries, I'm going to go ahead and use my underglaze pencil to mark all these. I'm going to put down the name, the number of the color, and the number of coats on here. All right, this is my chicken scratch. You may not be able to read it, but hopefully I can in the future. So 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2. And on the bottom are all the color names and the color numbers. The pencil line, from what I understand, should fire off in the glaze firing. However, if it doesn't, so be it. This is just a test pot, obviously. And now to glaze the top half. This glaze here is from my same pottery supplier. It fires clear. And I'm going to take my pot and dunk basically up until the line I drew into the glaze. All right, and there it is. I'm going to let this dry out and it'll go into my next glaze firing. And a quick bonus while I have my underglaze out. I have a pot here that I forgot to put my maker's mark in while it was still wet enough. So I'm going to see if I can use underglaze and stamp it on. So I went ahead and cleaned it off. Get a bit just on the end here. Oh, there we go. That's not too bad. The letter filled in, the D and the doctor part is filled in, but I'm not sure that's any less legible than when I stamp it into the clay directly. And here is the finished test pot. This fired well. So I've got the clear glaze on top. Turns a little bit translucent where it's a little bit more thick, and then the bottom, of course, is just raw clay like I showed. So first off, you can see all the different colors. They stayed pretty true to the way I put them on. The white actually got a little bit more white, I think. But overall, these stayed way more color stable than a glaze would in terms of what it looks like before and what it looks like after. So I think that could be useful for a variety of different techniques. The other question, of course, was what happens with the number of different applications of the underglaze. In here, I'm seeing much more subtle effects. I think, as I alluded to before, the issue is much more about coverage and getting that more uniform. The container says it's more translucent when you put on fewer coats and more opaque when you put on more. Having done this now, I think that is much more about, did I get down a good layer or not? So you can see, for instance, with the pink and a few of these others, like with the red, where I started the brush stroke, it's much more thin, versus where I ended the brush stroke, I put it down more thick. So I'm not sure I would count on trying to get a translucent effect. And maybe if I had a different color clay body, that might change, or I layered the different underglazes. But overall, a few coats, maybe 3 seems like a good number. One of the other questions I had is if the pencil would fire out, and indeed it did. I had all those crazy lines before where I was using it as layout lines, and they basically disappeared. The only thing that stayed is the underglaze pencil. And even that somewhat got obscured going underneath the glaze. I think this was a successful test. It was great to see what these underglazes look like in their finished form. And I can keep this on the shelf and go back to it, or show other people if they want to go ahead and paint some pots and have it act much more like paint. And then there was my bonus test. This is the pot that I forgot to put my stamp in, and so I used the underglaze and my regular stamp to try and get my logo into it. And this basically looks the same way as it did before it fired. I think if I were to do this more often, I'd want to redesign my stamp so it worked better for printing as opposed to being impressed into the clay. But it's good to know about. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thanks.